Good morning, students. Reconstitution of partnership firm, change in profit sharing ratio of existing partner is the topic which we were doing. In the previous session, we did treatment of goodwill, and in this session, we are going to do treatment of reserves. You all are familiar with the concept of reserve. You all know reserves are created out of existing profits, and they usually are created to meet some future emergencies or for the purpose of, you can say, prudence, which says that we have to create some reserve to meet the emergencies in future or some specific needs in future. So treatment of reserve we are starting with. There can be two cases, children, where treatment of reserve is possible. First, when reserves and accumulated profits and losses are transferred to capital accounts in the old ratio. Now, when there is change in profit sharing ratio of partners, there is one thing which comes into the mind of existing partners, that is, the one who is losing his share of profit will say that when the reserves were created, my share of profit was more, and later on in future, whenever the reserves will be distributed, my share of future profits will be less. So now he is very apprehensive. He wants that whatever reserves are created till date, that should be distributed in the old ratio only, because when these reserves were made, his share of profit was high in the profit sharing ratio. So this is quite fair also, that the whatever reserves or accumulated profits are there, that should be immediately distributed among the partners in their old ratio. This is case 1. And case 2 is another case where partners are even more wiser. They say, okay, fine, reserves are to be distributed. But if we distribute the reserve, there will not be any reserve. And if some emergency will come, how we are going to meet that emergency? So they decide, okay, reserves and accumulated profit and losses, the compensation will be provided to the sacrificing partner, but without crediting them to the capital account. Now you recall the treatment of goodwill concept. There we learned the entry of gainer to loser. Gainer to loser entry, where gainer has to compensate the loser in terms of goodwill. In that case, it was goodwill, according to the amount of gain which he has made by change in profit sharing ratio. In this case, whatever is the share of reserve as per the gain, that will be compensated by the gaining partner to the sacrificing partner. We will learn it in detail. Let us take up the cases one by one. I am taking up case 1, which is very easy case, and you have to keep in mind that for you in this case, the ratio relevant is old ratio. Even if in the question new ratio will be given, it will be certainly given, but it is useless for us because we'll be distributing the reserve using the old ratio only, right? So we are starting up with the case. Case 1, when the reserves and accumulated profits and losses are transferred to the capital account in old ratio, right? So remember the word old ratio. In this case, the accounting entry will be all the reserves, maybe general reserve or any specific reserve, reserve account debit, profit and loss account debit. This is, we are assuming that there is profit. Investment fluctuation reserve account debit. I have written something in the bracket, just notice it. It is excess of reserve over difference between book value and market value. Then workman compensation reserve account debit, excess of reserve over claim, to partners capital account or partners current account. Leave aside these red words that I will be discussing later. Just see the main entry. All reserves and accumulated profits will be debited, and who will be credited? The partners capital account, because whenever we give something to the partners, the account is credited. But reverse will be the entry, children, when there are some accumulated losses or there is some deferred revenue expenditure. So entry will become partners capital or current account debit to profit and loss account. See, in bracket I have written loss. So this entry will be done only when there is debit balance of profit and loss account. That means there is loss in profit and loss account. And to deferred revenue expenditure account, it is debit given to partners in old ratio. So if there are positive values to be given, partners capital account will be credited. If negative value will be given, partners capital account will be debited. Now keep these entries in mind and then we will be explaining the cases further. Let's take one example, children. Example 1 I am taking. X, Y and Z are partners sharing profits in the ratio of 4:3:2 from April 1, 2017. They decided to share profits equally. So the new ratio is 1:1:1. And keep this thing in mind, this new ratio is irrelevant for us. On that date, the book showed the following items. First, profit and loss account. In bracket I have written debit. When I write debit in bracket, you must immediately assume that this is loss. And loss goes to debit side of partner's capital account, 63,000. Second is general reserve, 45,000. General reserve obviously will be credited to the partners. Workman compensation reserve, 54,000. And fourth item is advertisement suspense account. Again it is debit because it is deferred revenue expenditure. Right? So 90,000. Record necessary journal entries. Now we have to keep in mind this profit and loss account is debit. So it will go on the debit side of partner's capital account. Advertisement suspense account is having debit balance. So it will again go on the debit side of partner's capital account. Whereas general reserve and workman compensation reserve will go on credit side of partner's capital account. Let's see how we are going to pass the entries. First entry I am doing for general reserve. I am doing the credit entry first. First is general reserve. General reserve account debit to X capital account, to Y's capital account, to Z's capital account. Remember the ratio? The ratio was 4:3:2. Old ratio I am talking about. 4:3:2. So general reserve account debit to all partners, 45,000 was the value which we will be distributing in the ratio of 4:3:2. So 20,000, 15,000, 10,000. Then workman compensation reserve account debit to X capital account, to Y's capital account, to Z's capital account. The value was 54,000 divided in old ratio. The credit given will be 24,000, 18,000 and 12,000. Then X capital account debit, Y's capital account debit to Z's capital account. X capital account debit, Y's capital account debit, Z's capital account debit to profit and loss account. This profit and loss account is nothing but the loss which will be distributed in old ratio. Right? So 4:3:2 we have divided it 28,000, 21,000, 14,000. Now see. The advertisement suspense account. Again it was a debit item. So partner's capital account will be debited. So X, Y, Z all capital account debited to advertisement suspense account. 90,000 divided in old ratio. So loss distributed in old ratio. Children, I hope the entries are clear. You have seen wherever credit balance is there, it will be credited to the partner's capital account. Wherever debit balance is there, it will be debited to partner's capital account. So this illustration clear? Moving on to the next thing. Here we'll be dealing with the workman compensation reserve. Workman compensation reserve, the accounting treatment will be doing. But first we need to understand the meaning why we create workman compensation reserve. You all know that we are in business. Normally there are factories where we work. So sometimes there is injury, sometimes there is death of workers. So we have to create provision out of the profits to pay compensation to the employees in case of any injury or death. There can be 4 possibilities here. Say for example, I have created a reserve of rupees 1 lakh, but there is no claim against it. There was no accident, so there was no claim against it. Now on the date of change of profit sharing ratio, partner will say, okay fine, the reserve was created since there is no claim. So the whole amount of reserve should be distributed in the old ratio. Second case, when amount of claim is less than the reserve. Say for example, I have a reserve of rupees 1 lakh and there is a claim of rupees 50,000. So, remaining 50,000 will be given to the partners in their old ratio, because 50,000 obviously I have created a reserve to give compensation. If there is a claim, I have to first provide for that claim, and whatever is a leftover amount, that will be distributed among the partners in their old ratio. Case 3, when amount of claim is equal to reserve. 1 lakh was there in reserve and the claim also is 1 lakh. So, nothing left to be distributed to the partners. कुछ बचा ही नहीं पार्टनर्स को देने के लिए, सारा का सारा क्लेम में यूज हो गया. Then when amount of claim is more than reserve, this was also possible that I provided for only rupees 1 lakh, but when the claim came, it was for rupees 1 lakh 20,000. So the claim is more than the value of reserve. Point clear? Right? So in that case, it is a case of loss. Now partners, in place of getting a credit as we were doing in previous 3 cases, will get a debit. Reason? The 20,000 excess claim will be considered as loss to the business, and thus that loss we are going to debit to the partners. Now we have to consider the cases. For all the cases which we are going to discuss now, we are taking a common example. Amount of workman compensation reserve we are assuming to be rupees 60,000. We are assuming that there are 3 partners P, Q and R. We are assuming that the old ratio is 3:2:1 and new ratio is 4:3:2, and as I have told you, in this case, the case 1 which we are doing, new ratio is entirely irrelevant for us. So we will keep in mind only 3:2:1, which is old ratio. Let's move further. Within this, taking the amounts which we have discussed earlier, case 1, when there is no claim against the reserve. We had a reserve of rupees 60,000, you remember? There is no claim against that reserve because there was no injury, no accident, no death. So, the whole amount will be distributed among the partner PQR in their old ratio 3:2:1. So, children, we are going to pass the entry workman compensation reserve account debit to P's capital account, to Q's capital account, to R's capital account. 60,000 divided in the ratio of 3:2:1, 30,000, 20,000, 10,000. Simple? Clear? Moving on to case 2. When the claim against reserve is rupees 24,000, you know that your reserve was 60,000 and the claim which you are getting is only 24,000. So it is less than the value of reserve. So from your reserve, first you will provide for the claim. You know that you have created the reserve of 60,000. Out of that, 24,000 will go for the claim, which is a liability for you. All liabilities are to be credited. But after giving a due credit to the claim, you are left with 36,000 rupees. And that 36,000 is purely a gain which is to be credited to all partners in their old ratio. So our entry will be modified. It will be workman compensation reserve account debit 60,000. To claim for workman compensation account 24,000. To P's capital account 18,000. To Q's capital account 12,000. To R's capital account 6,000. This I am dividing in their profit sharing ratio. Clear? Case is simple. Case is clear. Moving on to next. Case 3. When the claim against reserve is rupees 60,000. You remember the amount of reserve was 60,000. Now claim is equal to the reserve, exactly equal to the reserve. It is a coincidence only. Right? So the whole amount of reserve will go to claim for workman compensation account, and there will not be any leftover amount which partners can distribute as profit. So, simple entry, workman compensation reserve account debit to claim for workman compensation account 60,000. So, nothing left to be distributed among partners. Moving on to the 4th case, children. When the claim against the reserve is rupees 75,000, which is more than the amount of reserve. You know that we were having reserve of 60,000 only, and the claim has come 75,000. Now there is extra amount of 15,000. So we have to open one account called revaluation account because I have to re-evaluate my liability, reassess my liability. And when I reassessed, I found that the liability was more than the amount provided for that. So it will be considered as a loss, and for this purpose, I am going to create revaluation account. So workman compensation reserve account debit 60,000. Revaluation account debit 15,000. To claim for workman compensation account 75,000. Right? And as you know that all partners are responsible to bear the losses of the business. So this loss which I have recorded in the revaluation account will be distributed among the partners in their profit sharing ratio. When I created the account, I debited it. When I will close this revaluation account, I will credit it. So PQR debit to revaluation account. 15,000 loss will be distributed. 7,500, 5,000, 2,500. Clear? 3 is to 2 is to 1. So at this stage, I have introduced the new concept of revaluation account to you. This account is specially opened to record the value, the increased value of assets or decreased value of asset or change in value of liability. So it depends. It will be debited when there is any loss. It will be credited when there is any profit. And then finally, whatever is the net value in the revaluation account, it will be distributed among the partners according to whether it is profit or loss, it will be debited or credited. I hope we have made it clear up till workman compensation reserve. Revise this properly, see the illustrations once again, and then watch video 2, which is in continuation of this video. Thank you, children.